So I have a confession to make. I've bought another piece of equipment. Yes, I have bought another piece of equipment. I didn't intend to buy another piece of equipment, and I'll tell you the story. So on Friday night, came in, had a shower, and while I was waiting for some friends to arrive, because we were going to go and have a couple of beers and a meal, I sat there on my tablet, flicking through eBay, and up came a sampler. And it was on auction, and it was currently sitting at £10. So I threw in a bid. My friends arrived. We went up the pub, had a meal, had some beers. Didn't think anything more about it. Came home, went to bed, woke up the next morning with an email from eBay saying, "Congratulations, John, you have won." So I rang up Paula Penguin's mum and said, do they want to go on a road trip? So off we went on a road trip to Southend on Sea. Now, for those of you who know, I live in deepest, darkest Surrey, which is, if you think about London, so London is sort of like that, and deepest, darkest Surrey is down here, sort of, Gatwicky way, and Southend on Sea is over here. Right on the end of the Thames estuary. Now, Southend on Sea is famous for having a very, very long pier. It's the longest in the country, I think. Might be the longest in the world. And they have a train that trundles backwards and forwards up and down said pier because it's too long for older folks to walk up and down. So that's what Southend on Sea is famous for. It also so happened that Canvey Island was where this piece of equipment was, which is about 10 miles away from Southend on Sea. So we had the day out in Southend on Sea, rode the roller coasters, and had a thoroughly good time. So you're saying, what have I bought? This is what I've bought. And it's upside down. And it's quite heavy, actually. So, there you go. This is a Roland S750. I'll give you some background for those of you who don't know what an S750 is. So, Roland introduced a number of samplers over the years. And in the late 80s, early 90s, they had a range of samplers that included, in a rack mount format, and I'm probably going to miss some, but these are the ones I know about. There was an S220, an S330, an S550, which was a sparring partner with the S50 keyboard. Then there was an S750, I think there was an S760 and an S770. Now the S770 at the time was the flagship Dogs Doodads, and that retailed for £5,000 or $5,000 because it was pretty much in those days it was pound for dollar in terms of retail value. The S750, I think, retailed for £3,000/dollars at the time. So this was a £3,000 sampler back in the day in terms of technology. Now I've seen these go on eBay over the last couple of years. I've been watching eBay values, and I've seen these on eBay in a lot worse condition than this for well over £500. I paid nowhere near that, I might add. In fact, I paid considerably less than that, and I'm not going to say what I paid for this because it's a little bit unfair, but this really was a bargain, absolute bargain. And if you look at it, look at the ears, it's always a good telltale sign, the ears, about whether it's been in a rack and whether it's been abused. And actually there is not a scratch on this thing. It is absolutely mint, immaculate. There's a couple of little marks along the top that you probably wouldn't see where the top flares out, or this front panel flares out, I should say. I saw this working. The guy who sold it to me showed me this actually up and running in his house. It was making noises, and he loaded discs in and he made more noises. So I'm absolutely wrapped with what I bought. I have absolutely no idea how I'm going to use it, I might add. which is normally the way it happens with most of the keyboards I buy. Those that I can't get on with, I sell on, but those I can get on with, I rotate in and out of the studio, as many of you know. So this was manufactured, I suspect, around about 1991, I would imagine, or 92, somewhere in that era. I'm not quite sure. There's no clues on it. So if you were to look at the back of this thing, which is upside down, of course, because I've got it upside down, there are a pair of stereo outs over here, and then there were 6 assignable outs, so you could trigger and assign samples to come out of any of those. Very similar to the S6000 setup. Standard MIDI in, out and through. Then you've got this digital RGB output and a monochrome output. And for those of you who can remember, if you can draw your mind back that long ago, do you remember when you used to have SCSI discs and SCSI CD players, because it was the fastest way of transferring data between your motherboard and your hard drive? SCSI worked a lot faster and was incredibly good for that sort of stuff, whereas the I think it was IDE at the time, wasn't it? It was quite a slow sort of method of transferring data. So if you wanted data transferred quickly, you've got a SCSI drive. So there you go, there's a SCSI interface. Now, I haven't seen a SCSI interface for a number of years. I hasten to add, I've got no SCSI discs either. And then if you go around the front of this thing like that, and then so there's a thing for external control, which I'll talk about in a sec. Phones, foot switch, and these are the inputs. So the inputs on this are actually on the front, which is good because it's a pain in the rear end having to try and go around the back of this, although in my studio it wouldn't be a problem because I have it patched around through a patch bay if that was the case. But there are the inputs for 1/4 inch jacks. Disk drive, nice big display, and a wheelie wheel for value setting. Now I can't give you any more on this at the moment. I probably will in the coming weeks when I actually get it out and work it out. Now, a couple of things that are really interesting about this. So when it came with a mouse. Now this is a serial mouse. There you go. That's what a serial mouse looks like. This is the Roland serial mouse. It's called an MU1. So this was before IBM took over the world and created the PS style connector. You had serial mouses, and that's what a serial mouse looks like. And now, of course, if we see a mouse nowadays without a USB connector on it, we sort of worry. But that was before USB and before PS, the PS style connectors. Serial mouse. It also came with some instructions in Japanese. As you know, my Japanese is absolutely superb. I can get on with the instructions in Japanese. Not. So they will be being assigned to the file in cabinet, probably never to see the light of day again while I own this device. It then came with a box of discs. So there's the box, there's the discs. Now what's really interesting about this is all these discs are still in their cellophane wrapping. But it came with the 2.0 system disk for this machine. It came with sound disk number 1, sound disk number 2, and sound disk number 3, which, as you said, are still in their cellophane wrappers. Interesting. I did ask the guy why he was selling it when I went to pick it up, and he said he just hadn't used it. He'd had it for 4 years. He'd bought it from a studio in London. He had no idea how much use they had of it. So there you go. So that's probably the reason why nothing's been out of the cellophane wrapper. Also came with a backup of the system disk and something called the Roland tutorial disk. I have no idea what that's about. I'm sure I will find out. Should be interesting. So it's disc number 4. It also came with its manual, which is down here. Now, as you can probably see, that doesn't look like anyone's really ever thumbed through this and used this seriously. Because I'd expect to see that a bit more dog-eared, and it's not really. So that's pretty much immaculate as well. And then it came with this. Now, I spoke to a few friends last night about this because I really have no idea what this was all about. Now, apparently, this sampler came with the option to use. So, not only did you have the mouse for controlling things, it also came with the option to use a colour monitor, which Roland did sell at the time, but you can, of course, use a standard RGB monitor or a brand new monitor with an RGB interface that can be used. You just need to buy the relevant connector for the back of this thing. And it also came with a surface for it, what we would now call a surface, they used to call a controller, which is what this thing was all about. So there was something called the RC100, and you put this over the top of the RC100, and when it was plugged into the sampler, it effectively became the controller for the sampler. Now, having talked to a few friends who, well, a couple of them didn't really know what the S750 was, but one or two of them did, who worked in studios in sort of like the 80s, sorry, the 70s, we're talking about 70s, in the 90s and the 2000s, knew of the S7000, or S700 series, and said there was a controller, and the controller was really useful for making this thing work, but apparently they are like gold dust. So I may look out for one of those, but the chances of finding one of those to actually put this template on are probably pretty slim. But it was just nice to know that some people had used it in the past. There you go. And as I said, it came with an RGB monitor. The original, and Roland actually sold an RGB monitor for these things. So you'd actually have everything up on a simple 640 style monitor, 640 pixel style monitor, which you can do a lot of editing on apparently. So I might have to sort of look at that option. So that was the sampler. I was really rapt to having gone and got the sampler. Now the bonus. Roland sample library discs. Original cases. And I got the 501, which has got written on it keys, which I've no idea what's on any of these, to be honest. I've got the 502, which has written on it brass. I have the 503, which has written on it percussion. The 504, which says guitar and strings. The 505, which says koto, and I can't read the other word on that. 506, that says Japanese percussion. 507, that says Indian percussion. 509, that says African Eastern on it. The 508, that says Gamland wind and strings. The 551, that says strings brass. And the 552, that says keys, percussion and choirs. I think the boy did good. So, I don't think I'm going to have much time to play with this week, unfortunately, which is a real shame, because I was sort of looking forward to it, but my day today is going to be taken up with other things. My week next week is taken up with other things, and then obviously next weekend we come into Easter, and I've got lots of family commitments. So it may take a few weeks for me to get under the bonnet of the S750. But if you've got any comments or any tips on an S750, please drop me comments on the channel. I'm always welcome to comments on the channel, good or bad, as long as you don't swear. Be polite and be professional, but I'm always happy for criticism where I get things wrong, and I did the other week. I got something completely wrong, and when I actually went back and listened to myself, I wondered why I actually said what I said. But hey ho, there's a comment against the particular video that corrects me. So thank you to the person who did correct me. Can't be perfect all the time. Anyway, I have one thing further to add to this week. And this is sort of repair instrumentation really. So I'm not afraid to repair or get under the bonnet of a keyboard and have a look and do repairs myself, as long as it's within my skill set and I know where my skill set lies. So I can do most repairs myself. However, there's certain things that I can't do and I will give to a professional to do because they're far more skilled at doing whatever it is than I am. However, it's always useful when you're dealing with very delicate spaces to have delicate instruments. So a friend of mine works in the medical industry, and I don't know whether you're aware, but in the medical industry, a lot of items have very strict use by sell by style dates on them. And if you go beyond that, you can't use them for reasons of sterility, etc., etc. So her organisation were actually going to throw a load of instruments out, and she said, "Did I want some?" And I said, "What are they?" And she sort of showed me how things like this, which is very useful. Now these things, I've got she's given me various lengths of these, but they're very useful for getting into tight spaces, and they're used by surgeons. I mean, this as she explained, would be used potentially by a surgeon when he's sewing somebody up after surgery. So you put the needle in there, and so you know, if they can get this thing through skin, which is actually funny enough quite tough material to actually sew in. I didn't really realise that, but skin is actually quite tough. So you need to be able to grip and get a lot of force on this. So these are actually very good at gripping very small things. What they're also good at doing is actually, if you are working in a certain area, you can actually clamp this onto the leg of whatever it is you're doing, and it will actually act as a heat sink to protect the particular item that you are soldering. So this takes some of the heat, and the component itself doesn't take some of the heat, where you're dealing with something that is a little bit heat sensitive, like a chip, for argument's sake, if you were putting legs of a chip back in. So I got a number of those. Now I just thought I'd just say that because these things are so useful. I've never really looked at them before, but since they were given to me, I sort of can see them, and they are really useful little instruments to have in the tool bag. There you go. Anyway, I'm going to shut up now. I've got things to do, places to go, people to see, all that sort of jazz. So, thank you for watching, and I will see you hopefully next week. Bye-bye. So this is the point in the video where I turn around to you and say, if you enjoyed the contents of this video, please give it a thumbs up. It allows other people to find this content more easily that you have enjoyed. I'm sure by now, if you didn't like the content of the video, you've probably given me a thumbs down, but I'd prefer if you didn't. If you'd like to be notified about when I post additional content to this channel, somewhere about here should be the subscription icon. So please click on there and subscribe to the channel. Over here should be other content that you may enjoy that I've already done or posted to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again.